Document. Part 1. The alien ship floated silently through the endless blackness of space. It was sleek, almost elegant in its design, with smooth curves and glowing lines that pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. The vessel belonged to the Valkyrie, an advanced species known for their peaceful exploration of the stars. They had traveled far from their home world, driven by curiosity and a desire to understand the universe around them. Their mission was simple: to seek out new life and civilizations, to learn, and to share knowledge. Captain Ryan Cole stood on the bridge of the lead ship, his tall frame relaxed but alert. He was a man who carried himself with quiet confidence, his sharp eyes always scanning for anything unusual. His dark hair was cut short, and his face bore the marks of years spent leading expeditions into the unknown. Around him, the crew worked. Silently, each member focused on their tasks. The hum of machinery filled the air, a constant reminder of the technology that kept them alive in the cold void of space. Ryan wasn't alone in his thoughts. Beside him stood Lieutenant Ava Monroe, the ship's sensor operator. She was younger than most of the senior staff, but her skill with the sensors was unmatched. Her blonde hair was tied back neatly, and her blue eyes were fixed on the screens in front of her. She had been monitoring the ship's surroundings for hours, watching for any signs of danger or interest. So far, there had been nothing out of the ordinary. The fleet had entered a star system on the edge of uncharted space. It was a place no Valkyrie ship had ever visited before, and that made it both exciting and unpredictable. The stars here burned brightly against the darkness, their light reflecting off the metallic surfaces of the ships. The asteroids floating nearby added to the eerie beauty of the scene, their jagged forms casting long shadows as they drifted lazily through the emptiness. For now, everything seemed calm. Too calm, some might say. But Ryan knew better than to let his guard down. Space was full of surprises, and not all of them were pleasant. Still, he allowed himself a moment to appreciate the view. There was something humbling about being so small in such a vast universe. It reminded him why he had chosen this life: to explore, to discover, and to push the boundaries of what was possible. "Anything yet?" Ryan asked, breaking the silence. Ava glanced up from her console, shaking her head. "Nothing significant, Captain. Just the usual readings: asteroids, radiation, a few stray comets. Nothing that suggests intelligent life." Ryan nodded, though. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Call it instinct, or maybe just years of experience, but he had learned to trust his gut. He turned to look at the main view screen, which displayed a map of the surrounding area. The fleet was spread out in a loose formation, each ship scanning different sections of the system. So far, all reports indicated the same thing: empty space. But then, without warning, the sensors flared to life. Ava straightened in her seat, her fingers flying over the controls as she tried to make sense of the sudden spike in activity. Ryan stepped closer, his brow furrowing as he studied the data streaming across the screen. "What is it?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. "I'm not sure," Ava replied, her tone tinged with uncertainty. "There's something out there. Multiple objects, moving fast. They're emitting energy signatures, but they don't match anything in our database." Ryan frowned. Energy signatures meant technology, and technology meant intelligence. Could it be another species? Or perhaps an automated probe left behind by someone else? Either way, it was worth investigating. "Zoom in," he ordered. Ava adjusted the sensors, narrowing the focus to get a clearer picture. The objects appeared on the screen as tiny dots, their movements erratic but deliberate. They weren't natural formations, that much was certain. Whatever they were artificial. Could it be debris? Ryan asked, thinking aloud. "No," Ava said after a moment. "The patterns are too organized. Debris wouldn't move like that. And the energy signatures there, consistent, almost like engines." The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. Engines meant ships, and ships meant people, or at least beings capable of building them. This changed everything. Ryan took a deep breath, considering their options. They could ignore the readings and continue on their course, but that would mean missing a potential opportunity for first contact. On the other hand, approaching unknown entities always carried risks. If these ships belonged to a hostile species, the consequences could be dire. We need more information, Ryan decided. Send a drone to investigate. Keep it at a safe distance, but close enough to gather detailed scans. Ava nodded and relayed the order to the engineering team. Within minutes, a small reconnaissance drone detached from the hull of the ship and sped toward the mysterious objects. Its cameras and sensors began transmitting data back to the fleet, painting a clearer picture of what lay ahead. As the images came in, Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. The objects were indeed ships, large, angular vessels unlike anything the Valkyrie had encountered before. Their surfaces were covered in strange markings, and their designs suggested they were built for combat rather than exploration. Weapons turrets jutted out from their hulls, and their engines glowed with an intensity that spoke of immense power. Their warships, Ava whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the equipment. Human warships. Ryan's heart sank. Humans. The species had been mentioned in passing by other civilizations, often with warnings attached. Aggressive, territorial, quick to react with violence, those were the traits commonly associated with humanity. And now, here they were, face to face with a fleet of human warships. Before Ryan could respond, the sensors screamed again. This time, it wasn't just a spike, it was a flood of data, overwhelming the systems. Every screen on the bridge lit up with flashing alerts, and alarms blared throughout the ship. The human vessels had detected the drone and were responding with alarming speed. "They've locked onto us," Ava said, her voice trembling. "All weapon systems are active. They're targeting our fleet." Ryan clenched his fists, his mind racing. Had they made a mistake? Was this some kind of misunderstanding? Or had the humans simply decided to attack without provocation? "Raise shields," he commanded, his voice steady, despite the chaos unfolding around him. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers, and try to open a channel we need to communicate before this gets out of hand." The crew sprang into action, their movements precise and practiced. Shields shimmered into existence around the ships, creating a protective barrier against whatever might come next. Meanwhile, Ava worked frantically to establish contact, sending out signals in every known frequency. But the response, if there was one, was lost in the cacophony of alarms and warnings. The human ships were closing in, their weapons charging. Ryan could feel the tension on the bridge, thick enough to cut with a knife. Everyone knew what was at stake. One wrong move, and this encounter could turn deadly. And yet, amidst the fear and uncertainty, Ryan couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. This was their first meeting with humanity, a species rumored to be as ambitious and resourceful as the Valkyrie themselves. Perhaps there was still a chance to avoid conflict, to find common ground before it was too late. But for now, all they could do was wait and prepare for whatever came next. Document. Part 2. The tension on the bridge was palpable. Every crew member aboard the Valkyrie ship moved with urgency, their faces etched with concern as they monitored the incoming data. The human warships were closing in fast, their movements sharp and calculated. Lieutenant Ava Monroe sat at her station, her fingers flying across the controls as she tried to make sense of the chaotic readings flooding the sensors. The screens before her flickered with red warnings, each one more alarming than the last. "They're moving into attack formation," Ava said, her voice tight with unease. "Their weapons are locked onto us. I don't think they're here for a friendly chat." Captain Ryan Cole stood near the center of the bridge, his eyes fixed on the main view screen. The human ships loomed larger now, their angular designs starkly different from the sleek curves of the Valkyrie vessels. He could see the faint glow of their engines, pulsing with energy, and the ominous outlines of weapon turrets that bristled along their hulls. It was clear these ships were built for war, not exploration. "Are they responding to our signals?" Ryan asked, though he already suspected the answer. Ava shook her head, frustration evident in her expression. "Nothing yet. We've sent out every frequency we know, but either they can't hear us, or they're ignoring us. Maybe both." Ryan frowned, his mind racing. This wasn't how first contact was supposed to happen. In all his years of service, he had encountered dozens of species, some hostile, others peaceful, but never had he faced such immediate hostility without provocation. The humans hadn't even attempted communication, they had gone straight to threatening postures. Was this typical behavior for them, or had something gone terribly wrong? "Sir," Ava interrupted his thoughts, her tone urgent. "They're powering up their weapons. Whatever they're planning, it's happening now." Ryan's jaw tightened. He didn't want to believe the humans were preparing to fire, but the evidence was undeniable. Energy readings from the enemy ships surged, and the faint hum of charged plasma weapons echoed through space. The Valkyrie fleet was outnumbered and outgunned. If the humans decided to attack, there would be little time to react. "Raise shields to maximum," Ryan ordered, his voice calm but firm. "Divert power from non-essential systems if you have to, and keep trying to establish contact. We need to show them we're not a threat." The crew sprang into action, their training kicking in despite the fear gnawing at their nerves. Engineers rerouted energy to reinforce the shields, while communications officers continued broadcasting messages in hopes of reaching the humans. On the main view screen, the enemy ships grew closer, their silhouettes filling the frame like predators circling prey. Ryan turned to his tactical officer, a young man named Derek Hale. Derek was relatively new to the crew, but he had proven himself capable under pressure. His hands hovered over the controls, ready to execute any command Ryan gave. "Derek, prepare countermeasures," Ryan instructed. "If they fire, we'll need to evade. Focus on defensive maneuvers. We're not here to start a fight." "Yes, sir," Derek replied, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. As the seconds ticked by, the atmosphere on the bridge grew heavier. Everyone held their breath, waiting for the inevitable. The human ships were almost within firing range now, their weapons glowing brighter with each passing moment. Ryan clenched his fists, silently willing the humans to stand down. Surely, they must realize attacking would only lead to unnecessary bloodshed. But then, something unexpected happened. One of the human ships broke formation, veering slightly off course. Its movements were erratic, almost panicked. Moments later, a massive asteroid emerged from behind a nearby cluster of rocks. Colliding directly with the straggling vessel, the impact sent shards of debris spiraling into space, and the human ship listed dangerously, its shields flickering as it struggled to recover. "What just happened?" Ryan asked, his brow furrowing. "It looks like an accident," Ava replied, her eyes scanning the sensor readings. "That asteroid came out of nowhere. They didn't see it coming." Ryan exhaled slowly, relief washing over him for a brief moment. The collision had bought them some time, but it also complicated things. The damaged human ship was still operational, and the others showed no signs of backing off. If anything, they seemed angrier now, their formations tightening as they prepared to retaliate. "They're blaming us," Ryan muttered, realization dawning. "They think we caused that asteroid to hit them." Ava looked up sharply. "But we didn't do anything. That was just bad luck." "I know," Ryan said grimly. "But when people are scared, they look for someone to blame. Right now, we're the easiest target." The implications weighed heavily on him. Misunderstandings in space were dangerous enough, but when combined with fear and suspicion, they could spiral into outright conflict. Ryan knew they needed to act quickly to defuse the situation before it escalated further. Send another message, Ryan ordered. Make it simple. We are not your enemy. Use basic symbols and patterns, anything universal. We need to get through to them somehow. Ava nodded and began inputting the new transmission. Meanwhile, Ryan turned his attention back to the view screen. The human ships were regrouping, their movements deliberate and precise. Despite the damage to one of their vessels, they remained focused, their weapons still trained on the Valkyrie fleet. It was clear they weren't going to back down. Easily, sir, Derek called out, breaking the tense silence. They're charging their weapons again, multiple targets. They're aiming at our engines. Ryan's heart sank. Attacking the engines meant disabling the Valkyrie ships, leaving them stranded and vulnerable. It was a tactic designed to neutralize rather than destroy, but it was still aggressive. He couldn't let it happen without trying one last appeal for peace. Hold position, Ryan commanded. If we run, they'll see it as confirmation of guilt. We stay here and show them we mean no harm. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but no one questioned the order. They trusted Ryan's judgment, even if the odds seemed stacked against them. As the human ships drew closer, their weapons glowing ominously, Ryan felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just about survival, it was about proving that cooperation was possible. Even in the face of fear and mistrust, seconds stretched into eternity as the two fleets stared each other down. The Valkyrie shields shimmered brightly, ready to absorb whatever came their way. The human ships, however, showed no sign of hesitation. Their weapons fired simultaneously, bolts of plasma streaking toward the alien vessels like streaks of lightning. At the last possible moment, Ryan gave the order to evade. The Valkyrie ships jolted sideways, narrowly avoiding the worst of the attack. Shields flared as stray shots glanced off their surfaces, sending shockwaves rippling through the hulls. Alarms blared, and sparks flew from overloaded consoles, but the fleet remained intact. Damage report, Ryan barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. Minor breaches on Deck 4, Derek reported, his hands flying over the controls. Shields are holding, but we can't take many more hits like that. Ryan nodded, his mind racing. The humans weren't pulling punches. They were determined to disable the Valkyrie fleet. But why? What had driven them to such hostility? Ryan refused to believe it was pure malice. There had to be a reason, a misunderstanding that could be resolved. Keep broadcasting the message, Ryan said firmly, and adjust our trajectory. We need to create distance without appearing to flee. Ava adjusted the transmission settings, ensuring the signal remained strong despite the interference caused by the ongoing skirmish. The words "we are not your enemy" repeated endlessly, a desperate plea for understanding in a language neither side fully spoke. On the human flagship, USS Invincible, Commander Lucas Hayes watched the battle unfold with growing unease. His orders were clear: intercept and neutralize any unidentified vessels entering Alliance territory. But as the skirmish dragged on, he began to question whether they had misjudged the situation. The alien ships weren't fighting back, they were evading, signaling, trying to communicate. "Sir," Lieutenant Grace Kim spoke up, her voice hesitant. "Their transmissions. They might be trying to talk to us." Lucas hesitated, torn between duty and doubt. The aliens were unknown, unpredictable. But if there was even a chance they sought peace, could he justify continuing the attack? For now, the battle raged on, but seeds of uncertainty had been planted. Somewhere in the vastness of space, amidst the chaos and confusion, lay the possibility of connection, a fragile thread that might yet bind two vastly different species together. Document Part 3. On board the human destroyer, USS Invincible. Commander Lucas Hayes stood on the bridge, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. His sharp features were set in a stern expression, his piercing gray eyes scanning the monitors and displays that surrounded him. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife, and every crew member moved with purpose, their movements brisk but controlled. They were soldiers, trained for situations like this. But even the most experienced among them couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into uncharted territory. The alien ships had proven elusive, their movements quick and unpredictable. Despite the earlier barrage of plasma fire, none of the enemy vessels had been destroyed or even severely damaged. Their shields were holding strong, and their evasive maneuvers made it nearly impossible to land a decisive blow. It was frustrating, to say the least. Lucas hated uncertainty, went against everything he valued as a military leader. He preferred clear objectives, straightforward plans, and measurable outcomes. But this situation, this was anything but clear. "Status report," Lucas barked, his voice cutting through the hum of activity on the bridge. Lieutenant Grace Kim turned from her station, her dark hair tied neatly into a bun. She was one of the ship's top sensor operators, known for her sharp instincts and analytical mind. "Sir, the aliens are still broadcasting some kind of signal. We've isolated parts of it, but it doesn't match any known language or code. It could be an attempt at communication or it could be a distraction." Lucas frowned. Distraction, or not. The fact that the aliens hadn't retaliated puzzled him. If these beings were truly hostile, why hadn't they fired back? Their technology seemed advanced, arguably more sophisticated than humanity's own, and yet they were choosing to evade rather than engage. It didn't add up. Either they were testing the humans' capabilities, or there was something else going on entirely. Could it be automated? Lucas asked, referring to the transmissions. Some kind of pre-recorded message. Grace shook her head. "Unlikely, sir. The patterns are too dynamic, almost adaptive. Whatever they're sending is being adjusted in real time based on our actions. That suggests deliberate intent." Lucas crossed his arms, his brow furrowing deeper. Deliberate intent meant intelligence, which raised even more questions. Were these aliens trying to negotiate, or were they simply buying time until reinforcements arrived? For all he knew, this fleet could be a scouting party, sent ahead of a much larger invasion force. The thought sent a chill down his spine. "We can't afford to wait around for answers," Lucas muttered under his breath. Protocol dictated immediate action when encountering unidentified vessels in Alliance territory. Neutralization was the standard response, especially in cases where communication failed. But neutralizing an entire fleet without provocation felt wrong. Deep down, Lucas knew that firing blindly into the unknown could have catastrophic consequences, not just for his crew, but for humanity as a whole. "Sir," called Lieutenant Marcus Ford, the ship's tactical officer. "Their movements are becoming more erratic. They seem to be positioning themselves defensively, but they're also creating distance. Should we pursue?" Lucas hesitated. Pursuing the aliens would mean committing fully to combat, leaving no room for diplomacy. But letting them slip away wasn't an option either. They had entered human space without permission, and ignoring such a breach would set a dangerous precedent. Every instinct screamed at him to act decisively, but something held him back. Maybe it was the lack of retaliation. Maybe it was the strange transmission. Or maybe it was just the gnawing feeling that he didn't have all the facts. Before he could respond, another voice chimed in. "Commander, I think you should see this." It was Ensign Clara Bennett, a junior officer stationed at the communications console. Her tone was hesitant, almost nervous, and that alone caught Lucas's attention. He walked over to her station, leaning in to examine the data she had pulled up. "What am I looking at?" he asked, his gaze flicking between the screen and her face. "It's fragments of their signal," Clara explained, pointing to a series of waveforms displayed on the monitor. "I ran it through a basic translation algorithm, and while most of it is garbled, there are a few recurring elements. Patterns. One sequence keeps repeating it, translates roughly to 'not enemy.'" Lucas straightened, his mind racing. Could it really be that simple? Were these aliens genuinely trying to communicate, only to be met with hostility? If so, then the humans had made a grave mistake. Attacking potential allies or worse, peaceful explorers, would go down in history as one of humanity's greatest blunders. But how could he trust this information? How could he know for sure that the translation was accurate? Run it again, Lucas ordered. Cross-reference it with every database we have, and get me confirmation before we make any decisions. Clara nodded and immediately set to work, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Meanwhile, Lucas returned to the center of the bridge, his thoughts swirling. The battle had paused momentarily, giving both sides a chance to regroup. The alien ships hovered at a safe distance, their glowing lines pulsing faintly, as if alive. They weren't attacking, but they weren't retreating either. It was as if they were waiting for what Lucas couldn't say. "Sir," Grace spoke, up again, drawing his attention. "Their shields are still active, but they're not charging weapons. If they wanted to fight, they'd have done so by now." Lucas glanced at her, surprised by the conviction in her voice. Grace wasn't one to speculate lightly. If she believed the aliens weren't hostile, then it was worth considering. Still, he couldn't ignore the possibility that this was all part of a larger strategy, a trap designed to lure the humans into lowering their guard. "Keep weapons hot," he instructed, "but hold your fire unless provoked." Let's see what Bennett comes up with. As the seconds ticked by, the bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of machinery and the occasional beep of a console. Everyone waited anxiously for Clara's findings, knowing that the next move could determine the fate of both fleets. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Clara looked up from her screen, her expression a mix of relief and apprehension. "Sir, the pattern checks out," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. "It's consistent across multiple samples. They're repeating the same phrase over and over. 'We are not your enemy.'" Lucas exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. Whether or not the translation was completely accurate, the message itself carried undeniable significance. These aliens were making an effort to reach out, to bridge the gap between two vastly different species. Ignoring that effort would be reckless and potentially devastating. "All right," Lucas said, turning to address the crew. "Stand down offensive operations, maintain defensive posture, but do not engage unless absolutely necessary, and keep broadcasting that message back to them. If they're trying to talk, we need to show them we're listening." The order rippled through the ship, reaching every corner of the fleet. Weapon systems powered down slightly, though they remained ready to react if needed. On the main view screen, the alien ships seemed to pause, their movements slowing as if responding to the change in tone. For the first time since the encounter began, there was a glimmer of hope, but hope was fragile, and Lucas knew better than to let his guard down completely. Even if the aliens were sincere, there was still the matter of the asteroid collision incident that had triggered the initial hostilities. Misunderstandings like that could fester, leading to mistrust and further conflict. Bridging the divide between species wouldn't be easy, but it was a challenge Lucas was willing to accept as the two fleets drifted silently through the void. Separated by light years of cultural and biological differences, the seeds of understanding were planted. Somewhere in the vastness of space, amidst the chaos and confusion, lay the possibility of connection, a fragile thread that might yet bind two vastly different civilizations together. Document Part 4. The silence that followed Lucas Hayes's order to stand down was deafening. On the bridge of the USS Invincible, every crew member held their breath, waiting for the aliens' next move. The tension in the air was still thick, but it had shifted. No longer was it fueled by fear and aggression. Instead, it carried a sense of fragile anticipation, like standing on the edge of a precipice, unsure whether the ground beneath would hold. Grace Kim kept her eyes glued to the sensor readings. her fingers hovering over the controls as she monitored the alien fleet. Their ships remained stationary, their glowing lines pulsing faintly in the darkness of space. For now, they weren't moving closer or retreating. It was almost as if they were waiting for what Grace couldn't say. But the lack of hostile action gave her hope. Maybe, just maybe, humanity hadn't made a catastrophic mistake after all. "They're holding position," Grace reported, her voice softer than usual. "No weapons activity detected. Shields are still up though." Lucas nodded, his sharp features relaxing slightly. He turned to Clara Bennett, who was still seated at the communications console. "Any updates on their transmission?" Clara shook her head, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Nothing new, sir. They're repeating the same phrase. 'We are not your enemy,' over and over again. I've adjusted our response signal to match theirs, but there's no way to tell if they're receiving it or understanding it." Lucas clenched his jaw, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. Communication was key, but without a common language or framework, progress felt agonizingly slow. Every second that passed without resolution increased the risk of misunderstanding, and misunderstanding, he knew, could easily spiral into violence. "Keep trying," Lucas ordered, and broadened the frequency range. "If they're using technology beyond our comprehension, we might be missing something." Clara nodded and went back to work, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she adjusted the parameters of the broadcast. Meanwhile, Lucas turned his attention to the main view screen. The alien ships loomed large, their sleek designs starkly different from the angular, utilitarian vessels of the human fleet. Despite their advanced appearance, there was an elegance to them, a sense that they were built not just for war, but for exploration and discovery. It was a thought that gnawed at Lucas. What if these beings weren't invaders? What if they were explorers, much like humanity's earliest astronauts? The idea seemed far-fetched, given the circumstances, but it wasn't impossible. Humanity had ventured into the stars with the same mix of curiosity and caution. Perhaps these aliens shared that drive to seek out new worlds, new life, and new civilizations. But even as he entertained the possibility, Lucas couldn't shake the weight of responsibility resting on his shoulders. His orders were clear: protect Alliance territory at all costs. Yet, how could he justify attacking beings who might simply be trying to make contact? The stakes were too high for rash decisions. One wrong move could lead to disaster, not just for his crew, but for humanity itself. "Sir," Marcus Ford spoke up, breaking the tense quiet. "Their shields are fluctuating, not dropping completely, but it's like they're adjusting them." Lucas frowned. "Adjusting them how?" Marcus hesitated, studying the data streaming across his screen. "I'm not sure, sir. It's subtle, but it looks deliberate. Almost like they're signaling us." Lucas straightened, his interest piqued. Signaling? That would mean the aliens were actively trying to communicate, using more than just words. If true, it could be a chance to establish a connection without relying solely on translation algorithms. "Can we replicate it?" Lucas asked, turning to Grace. She bit her lip, her eyes darting between her monitors. "Maybe, if we can isolate the pattern and mimic it, we might be able to respond in kind. But it'll take time." "Do it," Lucas said firmly, "and fast. We don't know how long they'll wait." Grace nodded and began working alongside Clara, the two women collaborating to decode the shield fluctuations. The rest of the bridge crew watched in silence, their focus unwavering. Everyone understood the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just about avoiding conflict, it was about proving that humanity could rise above its instincts and embrace cooperation, even in the face of the unknown. On board the lead alien ship, Captain Ryan Cole stood at the center of the bridge, his expression a mix of relief and unease. The humans had stopped firing, and their ships were no longer advancing. It was a small victory, but Ryan knew better than to celebrate prematurely. The standoff was far from over. and the slightest misstep could reignite hostilities. They've altered their transmissions, Ava Monroe reported, her voice tinged with cautious optimism. They're sending back fragments of our message. It's crude, but it matches some of the patterns we've been broadcasting. Ryan exhaled slowly, his shoulders relaxing fractionally. So, the humans were listening. That was a start. But communication through signals and patterns was only the beginning. To truly bridge the gap between their species, they needed something more tangible, a gesture of goodwill, perhaps, or a demonstration of intent. What about their shields? Ryan asked, recalling the earlier reports of fluctuating energy. Signatures.ava checked her console, her fingers moving swiftly over the controls. Still active, but they've started mimicking our adjustments. It's inconsistent, like they're struggling to keep up, but it's definitely deliberate. Ryan nodded thoughtfully. The humans were trying to mirror the Valkyries' actions, clumsy though their attempts might be. It was a sign of effort, of willingness to meet halfway. In Ryan's experience, such gestures often paved the way for meaningful dialogue. Prepare a visual signal, Ryan instructed. Something simpler, geometric shape, maybe. Let's see if they can interpret it. Ava raised an eyebrow. You think they'll understand? It's worth a shot, Ryan replied. If they're intelligent enough to build those ships, they should be able to recognize basic shapes. And if they respond, we'll know they're serious about talking. Ava nodded and began inputting the commands. Moments later, one of the smaller Valkyrie ships projected a holographic image into space, a bright, glowing triangle that pulsed rhythmically against the blackness of the void. The shape was accompanied by a low-frequency pulse, designed to catch the attention of the human sensors, back on the Invincible. Grace noticed the new development immediately. Sir, she exclaimed, excitement creeping into her voice. They've sent something, a projection. A triangular shape, accompanied by a rhythmic energy pulse. Lucas stepped closer to her station, his eyes narrowing as he studied the data. A triangle. Could it be symbolic? It's possible, Grace replied. Geometric shapes are often used in first contact scenarios because they're universal. They might be testing you as seeing if we can respond. Lucas considered this for a moment. If the aliens were indeed testing humanity's ability to interpret symbols, then responding correctly could build trust, but getting it wrong could deepen the divide. Send back a square, he decided. Keep it simple. If they're looking for reciprocity, let's give it to them. Grace relayed the order, and within minutes, the Invincible projected its own hologram, a glowing square that hovered near the ship's hull. The two shapes floated side by side, a silent exchange in the vast emptiness of space. For several long moments, nothing happened. Then, the alien ships responded. A third shape appeared, a circle, this time rotating slowly, as if to convey motion. It was followed by another pulse, stronger and more complex than before. They're escalating, Grace observed, her voice tinged with awe. Each signal is building on the last. They're teaching us. Lucas felt a flicker of admiration for the aliens' ingenuity. They weren't just communicating, they were guiding humanity step by step, laying the foundation for mutual understanding. It was a delicate process, fraught with uncertainty, but it was working. Slowly, painfully, the two species were finding common ground. Respond with a star shape, Lucas instructed. Let's show them we're following along. Grace complied, and soon, a 5-pointed star joined the growing collection of symbols. The alien ships paused, their glowing lines dimming slightly as if in contemplation. Then, to everyone's astonishment, a fourth shape appeared, a spiral, intricate and mesmerizing, spinning gracefully in the void. They're showing off now, Marcus muttered, earning a few nervous chuckles from the crew. But Lucas didn't laugh. He stared at the spiral, his mind racing. The aliens weren't just demonstrating their intelligence, they were inviting humanity to join them, to participate in this dance of discovery. It was a bold move, one that required trust on both sides. "Prepare a shuttle," Lucas ordered. "Suddenly, I want volunteers to meet them face to face." The bridge fell silent, the crew exchanging shocked glances. Meeting the aliens directly was risky, but it was also the logical next step. If humanity wanted to prove its sincerity, it would have to take the leap. "I'll go." Marcus volunteered immediately, stepping forward. "I've got tactical experience. If things go south, I can handle myself. And I'll go too," Grace added, surprising everyone. "If we're going to talk, we'll need someone who understands their signals. I can help translate." Lucas hesitated, weighing the risks. Sending a shuttle meant exposing his crew to potential danger, but staying safe behind shields wouldn't bring peace. Finally, he nodded, as Marcus and Grace prepare. Document. Part 5. The shuttle detached from the USS Invincible with a soft hiss, its engines glowing faintly as it drifted toward the alien fleet. Inside, Marcus Ford and Grace Kim sat side by side, their expressions tense but determined. The small craft was equipped with basic life support systems and communication tools, but neither of them felt particularly safe. They were venturing into uncharted territory literally and figuratively, and there was no guarantee the aliens would welcome them. Grace adjusted her headset, ensuring the translation device was functioning properly. It wasn't much a hastily assembled piece of equipment designed to interpret patterns and symbols, but it was all they had. She glanced at Marcus, who was gripping the controls tightly, his knuckles white. Despite his tough exterior, she could see the flicker of fear in his eyes. "You okay?" she asked softly. Marcus forced a grin, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, just thinking about how this is either going to make history or get us killed." Grace managed a weak laugh. "Let's hope for the former." The shuttle moved slowly, its trajectory carefully calculated to avoid triggering any defensive systems on the alien ships. On the viewscreen, the sleek vessels loomed larger. With each passing second, their glowing lines pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. There was something almost hypnotic about their design, a sense of elegance that contrasted sharply with humanity's utilitarian warships. As they approached, one of the alien ships broke formation, drifting closer to meet them. Its surface shimmered, faintly, reflecting the light of nearby stars. A hatch opened near the center of the vessel, revealing a docking bay large enough to accommodate the shuttle. Marcus guided the craft inside, his hands steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. When the shuttle came to a stop, the two humans exchanged a glance. This was at the moment of truth. Neither of them knew what awaited them beyond the airlock, but there was no turning back now. "Ready?" Marcus asked, his voice low. Grace nodded, clutching a handheld scanner. "Let's do this." On board the alien ship, Captain Ryan Cole watched the monitors closely as the human shuttle docked. He had chosen Lieutenant Derek Hale to accompany him during the meeting, knowing the young officer's calm demeanor would help ease tensions. Together, they waited near the airlock, flanked by a pair of security personnel armed with weapons. When the airlock cycled open, the humans stepped out cautiously. Marcus went first, his tall frame clad in a standard-issue Alliance uniform. Grace followed close behind, her smaller stature making her seem less intimidating. Both of them held their hands away from their sides, a universal gesture of peace. Ryan studied them carefully, noting their expressions, nervous but resolute. He took a step forward, raising his own hand in a similar gesture. Behind him, Derek translated the movement into a series of clicks and hums, the Valkyrie equivalent of spoken language. The humans flinched slightly at the sound, but they didn't retreat. "Welcome," Ryan said, his voice transmitted through a translator device. The words came out distorted but intelligible. "We mean no harm." Grace blinked in surprise, then quickly consulted her scanner. "He's speaking," she whispered to Marcus. "Their language. It's complex, but the device can handle it." Marcus nodded, stepping forward slightly. "We don't want to fight," he replied, his tone measured. "We're here to talk." Ryan tilted his head, studying the humans with curiosity. They were so different from the Valkyrie, shorter, broader, with rougher features and limited sensory capabilities. Yet, there was an undeniable intelligence in their eyes, a spark of determination that transcended species. Derek stepped forward, holding up a tablet-like device, displaying the geometric shapes exchanged earlier. "Symbols," he said, pointing to the screen. "You understand?" Grace nodded eagerly, pulling out her own scanner. "Yes, shapes, communication." Ryan smiled faintly, relief washing over him. Finally, they were making progress. He gestured for the humans to follow him, leading them deeper into the ship. The corridors were wide and illuminated by soft, ambient light, their walls adorned with intricate carvings that told stories of the Valkyrie's long history of exploration. As they walked, Grace couldn't help but marvel at the technology surrounding her. Everything was seamless, almost organic in its design. Even the air smelled different, cleaner, fresher, with a faint metallic temps. It was overwhelming, but also fascinating. They arrived at a large chamber filled with holographic displays and control panels. In the center stood a circular table, its surface glowing faintly. Ryan motioned for the humans to sit, and they obliged, still wary, but willing to listen. Back on the Invincible, Commander Lucas Hayes paced the bridge anxiously, awaiting updates from the shuttle. Every second felt like an eternity, and the lack of communication only heightened his nerves. What if the aliens turned hostile? What if Marcus and Grace never returned? "Sir," Clara Bennett called out, breaking his train of thought. "We're picking up fluctuations in their energy signatures. Looks like they're opening a channel." Lucas hurried to her station, his heart pounding. "Patch it through." Static crackled over the speakers before Grace's voice came through. Shaky, but clear. "Commander, we're aboard the alien ship. They're cooperative. We're trying to establish a dialogue." Lucas exhaled sharply, relief flooding through him. "Good work, Lieutenant. Keep us updated, and stay safe." "Yes, sir," Grace replied before cutting the transmission. On the alien ship, Ryan leaned forward, his expression intent. Through the translator, he explained the miscommunication that had led to the earlier skirmish, the asteroid collision, the humans' assumption of hostility. Marcus listened carefully, nodding along as Grace translated. "We didn't mean to attack," Marcus said finally. "We thought you were a threat. That asteroid, it was an accident, not an ambush." Ryan's gaze softened, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Accidents happen, but now we know. No more fighting." Grace smiled, faintly, encouraged by the progress. She pulled up the scanner again, showing Ryan a map of the surrounding star system. "This is our territory. We protect it. But we're willing to share knowledge if you are." Ryan studied the map, his brow furrowing. He pointed to a cluster of coordinates near the edge of the system. "Our path. We explore, not invade." Marcus nodded, relief evident in his posture. "Then maybe we can work together, learn from each other." For the first time since the encounter began, hope replaced fear. Both sides understood that trust wouldn't come as silly. It would take time, patience, and effort. But they had taken the first step, proving that even in the vastness of space, connection was possible. As the meeting continued, the humans and Valkyrie exchanged information about their respective civilizations. Ryan shared stories of his people's journeys across the stars, while Grace described humanity's rise from Earth to the cosmos. Despite their differences, they found common ground in their shared curiosity and drive to explore. By the time the shuttle returned to the Invincible, the mood on both fleets had shifted dramatically. The standoff had ended, replaced by cautious optimism. For now, the humans and Valkyrie agreed to part ways peacefully. promising to reopen communication once they had processed everything they had learned. As the alien ships disappeared into the void, Lucas Hayes stood on the bridge, watching the monitors go dark. He felt a strange mix of pride and humility. Humanity had faced the unknown and chosen understanding over conflict. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start, and in the vastness of space, amidst the chaos and confusion, lay the possibility of connection, a fragile thread that might yet bind two vastly different civilizations together.